Well, you sort of absorbed my own personal homage to a show that I really enjoy. I wanted to just give a background on who Digital Smiths are and what we do. A number of years ago, Digital Smiths got into the whole world of personalized recommendations, more like this, things you may like, et cetera, and so on. It really took a number of the MSOs by storm, developed a very broad consumer base, customer base, totaling 7 of the top 10 MSOs. As we look forward into what our new challenges are, we want to work with our customers to really take advantage of the data. So, full disclosure, I'm a total data geek. We really dive into a lot of the data to try and really drive and pull out different types of learnings and different types of lessons, all for obviously business purpose. So it starts really actually not with me and not with Digital Smiths, but really actually with a couple of reports that were done by a couple of different consultants. McKinsey, well-known, Harvard Business Review, well-known as well. And what they did was they looked at how customer sentiment and customer satisfaction can really be measured and really be tracked over time. And what they found was that within a certain given period of time, let's say 90 days, somebody can go from a very high degree of satisfaction, 80, 90% on the left-hand side, to a very, well, middling degree of satisfaction over on the right-hand side. And the trouble that the MSOs had in tracking this progression was that they had a very limited number of touch points. You may have a monthly or a quarterly phone call to check, or there may be an email survey that goes out, but it's not really what I'd call a true data heartbeat of what the customer is seeing and what the customer is doing as they engage with the solution. So this is really where we believe content discovery survives. We think this is where content discovery can start to develop that heartbeat, and really where we can measure our customers and the subscribers and how they use the solution on a day-by-day basis. And what I mean by that is take a Friday afternoon, a Friday evening, you put the kids to bed, it's 8 o'clock, you're tired, you sit down on the couch, and you literally have 2 to 3 minutes to select the content you're looking for, whether that's something I know what I'm looking for, we'll talk about that in a second, or it's I'm looking for some content I've never seen before. That's really the challenge that our customers are faced with, and that's where we think data becomes so critical in being able to solve that problem. So it's really developing this heartbeat and really using this to drive, obviously, the subscriber experience and the customer satisfaction, obviously towards the top side of the right-hand side of my slide rather than the bottom. Now this matters, right? It's not just an academic exercise. It's not just a matter of creating a new metric, a new KPI. This actually ties to revenue, and this is the value that HBR and McKinsey put on this. And they looked at 2 industries. They looked at the pay TV industry, and they looked at the auto insurance industry as well. And they saw in the pay TV industry a very solid correlation between being able to develop that, what they called customer journey, what I call really a heartbeat of the subscriber, developing that metric in real time and being able to use that and then see how that drives in a correlated sense to increased revenue. So it does matter for them. They're obviously very interested in it. So let's take a couple of examples. I love anecdotal. I love throwing up data on a screen. So a couple of anecdotal examples. Here's one. And it surrounds the concept of more like this. So everybody in this audience probably very familiar with this. I'm looking at a piece of content. I'm interested in that content. I go to an info page associated with it, and I have several other pieces that are more like this. If you're interested in this, you enjoy this, here's more along these same lines. So we asked ourselves, we said, well, what's interesting to us is when are people actually clicking on that content or on those suggestions more than other times? And we plotted up here on the right-hand side views over a 7-day period. So you actually have 7 lines right here represented by these red points. And we've broken this down by hour of the day. So very, very easily, of course, we can see that, 2, 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning, there's really no viewing happening. And obviously we drive into noon, higher viewing rates, and we drive into prime time, and obviously those are the highest viewing rates. And to a T, we walked around the office and said, when do you think people are clicking on things? And I continued that out in the field and asked customers here and there. And everybody said, oh, it's prime time. And so we let the data show us and let the data guide the way. And actually turns out, and this was something that was sort of really off the wall, and we did a check, and we did another check, and we did another check to make sure this is the case. And it turns out that people are actually clicking on these suggestions at around the 10 a.m. time frame. And we sat back and we thought, okay, maybe this starts to make sense. Going back to my analogy of sitting down on Friday night, 8 o'clock, kids are to bed, I basically know what I want to watch. I want to catch up on this. I want to catch up on that. There's a game on that I want to see. That's a very different scenario than what may be occurring at 10 in the morning when the morning talk shows end and somebody is actually now really interested in getting a recommendation for something that they would like to consume. And so now our customers can start to utilize this and say, okay, if that's the case, maybe this is the time that I should be promoting the rom-com that you could watch, that you could buy now, but watch later on in the evening when everybody's together, that you have that moment in time. So we continued with this example, or we continued with different examples, and we went on and said, all right, well, what else can we pull out of this? And this was another example related to search. And of course, you know, there's many different ways that you can search. There's different devices that you can use. There's different devices that you're searching for your content on. And we looked at the length of keywords. And we found broadly two things. One, we found, again, this concept of 2 minutes. 2 minutes and that's all you got. If you can't do something, you can't find them their content in 2 minutes. They're off to another device. They're off to another service. They're off to another solution. Or in my case, I'm off to doing the honey-do list that my wife has set for me, and she says I haven't found anything, so now I got to work on it. But you have 2 minutes within which to do that, and you also have about 2 characters, maybe 3. That's what the data show. That really, when I start typing BEV, that this really becomes a personalized goal. I want to see, for instance, Housewives of Beverly Hills, and the system, the solution should know that. It should be able to personalize that for me. So I don't have to drive down through a bunch of results like Beverly Hills Cop. Or vice versa, another household that is looking for Beverly Hills Cop doesn't want to be inundated with Housewives of Beverly Hills, Atlanta, etc., and so on. So we really drove to more personalized results to try and drive people into their content. Then obviously being able to tie that to a higher concept of a heartbeat and then to satisfaction. Now, we also looked just very briefly also at different devices, and you can imagine if I'm searching on my iPhone, I'm using a sort of TV Everywhere app, I can get away with a few more characters, and that's what this chart is showing, is that you get a few more characters with a full keyboard versus that old clunky remote. Again, 2, maximum 3 characters that you want to see. All right, well, what does this all really drive towards? It drives towards this understanding of engagement. And it drives to then being able to say, how can I gauge how people are interacting with a content discovery solution, with my solution that I'm promoting, whatever content it is, relative to the views. And so now I'm tying 2 pieces together. I'm really tying audience measurement together as well as this concept of a heartbeat. And saying when we pair these things together, we really have an idea that we can use and interrogate for different approaches to developing, at the end of the day, trust. And we argue that, in fact, in many ways, this is what we're trying to develop. We're trying to develop a concept of trust. So I've got 4 quadrants up here. On the x-axis, I have a measure of engagement. All right? How engaged are people with the service? Are they using search? Are they using more like this? Are they using recommendations, etc.? On the y-axis, I have view counts. So how really engaged is this household or this account in terms of how many different items they've actually watched? And the data that I'm showing in this chart is basically one account for a month. So that data point that I've highlighted there, that's one account for a single month. So it really becomes interesting to us now to say, well, what can we do to drive those individuals up into my desired quadrant? My desired quadrant is in the upper right, highly engaged, very educated on the tool, and obviously consuming the right content for them, large amounts of that content. So I can now start to engage with those individuals and target specific promotions based on their type of viewing behavior, based on the way they engage with the solution. I would argue that, in fact, that group right there is probably even more interesting to me but we have to be very careful with this group. Let's take a step back and think about who these people are. So they're not engaged. They're not using content discovery. They're not using much more than maybe the grid. And they're also not watching a lot. So I'll pull a person from my family. This is my mom. She watches baseball. That's all she watches. Nothing else, right? And I tell you, if I put a Game of Thrones promotion in front of my mother to try and get her to move, forget about it. In fact, I will probably frustrate her because I'm putting her in a position where I am now taking her away from what she really wants to do. So I, as the MSO, now have to really align myself with the objectives of my individual. So inside of that lower quadrant on the bottom left, I've got sports fanatics, I've got reality TV show fanatics, I've got, drama, comedy, etc. I have to now target a specific promotion to just that individual and not over-inundate them. The guys on the upper right, no problem. They can handle the engagement that I want to push to them. They can handle the feedback that I may be trying to derive from them. But on the bottom left, I've got to take it much slower, and I've got to be very careful about that. So once again, it's this concept of really driving trust out of what we're trying to achieve rather than just inundating people with pure recommendations. It has to be at the right time, on the right device, with the right content. Once we have that in place, we can now take the next step, which is, whoops, I went one too far, sorry. I think I can go back. No, there we go. Again, I have to tie this really together with views. This is nothing without views, and views comes obviously from all of these connected devices. And frankly, the MSOs, they have these data. These are IP-connected devices, whether it's my iPhone, iPad, or new set-top boxes. Even legacy boxes are now being driven up onto this stage so that the data can then close the control loop. I'm a controls engineer by training, so I apologize for using some of that terminology, but really that's what we're doing. We're driving a control loop to close and really utilizing this information to then make further decisions. All right, so what are we trying to get towards? We're trying to get towards personalized merchandising. That's effectively what it is. And when we go out to the marketplace and start to ask questions, these are the questions we're hearing. What impact can these types of promotions have? What promotion channels are worth continuing to invest in? Which combinations are worth continuing to invest in? I mean, essentially what we're getting down to is this concept right here. Where should people spend their time and energy? Now, I'm talking about the MSO marketing company, not just the subscribers. Where should the MSOs spend their time? Where should they spend their marketing efforts? So we take, for instance, all of these different promotion channels that exist today, website banners, social media, email campaigns, all of these things combined together with different user interfaces on different devices, different time of day, like we just saw with the example before, and now tie that with content discovery. And I can see here that the effect of the latest teen movie, there are different ways to approach the right quadrant of individuals as well as with the right content in the right way, those types of individuals with those viewing behaviors, versus maybe somebody who's looking for the latest period piece. That's a very different type of engagement. And there has to be a different set of tools that you'll use to approach that individual, to develop the trust, and then to put the promotion in the right time. All right, so finally, what does it all come to? At the end of the day, we did this, and I've done this with a couple of different customers of ours, and here's some results. We took a few different assets. These are movies that are promoted, an action-adventure, an action, and a sports movie. And we've then tailored specifically the right time, the right device, the right content, the right viewing behavior with the right personalization. And you can drive a significant increase in engagement. And you can see that here with some of these numbers that I put up. Now, this also drives to the bottom line as well, and those numbers maybe I can't speak about, but I can show you at least some of these interim numbers of what these engagement pieces can become. And that's really what we're trying to get at. We're trying to take all these pieces together, the engagement that comes from the user and how they use the system, the views that come back from the devices, tie those together so that you can specifically target individuals with the right behavior and tie them to the right promotion at the right time on the right device, etc. So again, I appreciate the time. Thank you very much. These are my slides, and I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
What I thought was interesting on one of the early slides was that, because you didn't say, clearly the data was falling in at noon and at 10 o'clock.
Yep.
Says to me that that's a lot of potentially mothers and women and things like
Sure.
that. People are at home.
Sure.
So to what extent do you advise your clients about the kinds of things that they can do and how they can act, how they can act on that data, or do you really leave that up to them?
That's a great question, yeah. I think we're touching on the concept of PII, personally identifiable information, and this is obviously an area where we work very closely with our customers to make sure that they adhere to the appropriate, let's say, rules and guidelines that they should. So we don't get really involved too much in going down and saying this is this type of individual. We'll talk about the viewing behavior of that individual, but maybe we won't connect it to, let's say, age group or sex or let's say, socioeconomic status. But passing this on to them, of course, they have all that information. They can utilize that for their purposes.
But because you have so many other types of data that you can look at to understand the context of that particular chart,
Sure.
to what extent do you provide them with the intelligence to know what's working for other clients, perhaps? Do you provide them with that kind of insight, or you really just sort of hand it off?
Another good question, yeah. We're also bound, obviously, by NDA to maintain, let's say, some silos between one customer's data versus others. And so we really let the customer sort of explore their data. And to be fair, everybody's a little bit different. That one peak at 10 o'clock, there's another customer we did something similar with, and their peak was a little broader, a little bit around the same time, but a little bit broader. Our methodology is to provide them a platform on which they can find these things. These are interesting anecdotes that we've pulled out, and as we've been starting to work with customers, we've developed them. But our idea is to let them take advantage of their knowledge. They know their subscriber base much better than we ever could. But as long as we can give them these sort of interesting insights, they can use that for business purposes, probably beyond what we could. So we want to provide them a platform that they can calculate this and use it for whatever business purpose.
And now that you're a TiVo company, as
Yes.
your logo says,
Yes.
To what extent can you hand them also over to TiVo? What kind of relationship have you built with TiVo in your culture, perhaps to advise your data client about how they can take advantage of the TiVo platform with that data that you've just given them?
Good question again. I would say, first of all, we do maintain silos between all of our customers, including some in-house data that we have access to. We sort of treat all of our customers in the very same way, and that really hasn't changed with our acquisition. So for everybody else's benefit, thank you for raising it, Tracy. We were acquired by TiVo back in January of this year. It's been actually quite a fun ride with them. And in many ways, we've sort of maintained our own sort of vision and where we're headed. That really hasn't changed, nor has the way we address their data relative to, let's say, internal TiVo data. Great question, thank you.
Well, thanks very much, Chris. Those are all my questions. Anybody else?
Any other questions?
I think we're good. This has been great.
Thank you very much, everybody. Have a great day.